Hi guys, so today we're going over total lung volumes or lung capacity, which is kind of an idea that is important on the NPTE specifically to talk about like all of these different values that make up your lung volume, which is just the space that's available in your lungs to be usable, right? So we're going to talk about like the different volumes, the different stuff. Oftentimes this is presented in a really like chaotic, hard to understand way with like this weird chart, and it just doesn't make sense. At least it didn't to me. So I'm going to explain it in a way that's a little bit easier to understand, okay? So I want you to just sit here and observe your breathing as we're starting out. Normally you're sitting here and you're just taking in kind of shallow breaths, just easy going, not really pacing, doing anything crazy, right? You're just breathing in and out. That air that you're just breathing in and out on a normal, regular basis is about 10% of your total ability to use your lungs, right? It's about 10%, and that's called your tidal volume, okay? And that's 10% of your lung space, or your total lung capacity. So your total lung capacity is 100% of your lung space. And all that means is that capacity is just an ability to do something, right? So 100% of your lung space is your total lung capacity. Whole lung. This whole thing right here, okay? So your normal breathing, your everyday breathing that you and I are just doing, sitting here, is only taking up about 10% of your lung space, okay? Not a huge bit. It's just very shallow. But you and I know that we can inhale and fill up more of our lungs and stretch our lungs out. And that capacity to stretch out and inhale more is known as our inspiratory reserve volume. Okay? And that is about 50%. So that space that's left over, so you're taking normal, regular breaths, and then you decide, I'm going to take in a deep breath. So breathe in a little bit, and then you breathe in more. That's your inspiratory reserve volume. You filled up as much of your lung as possible with air. You filled up about 50% more of your lungs. So if you add that to your just normal breathing, you get what's called your inspiratory capacity, or your IC. And that makes sense that that would be 60% of your lungs, right? That's your ability to take in basically a deep breath, right? Okay, so deep breathing, right? When you exhale, if you are to forcefully exhale and get rid of more breath, that is called your expiratory reserve volume, okay? So that's your exhaling power, to be able to get rid of air from your lungs. 15%. So your total volume is normal in and out, your shallow breathing. And then if you were to force more air out of your lungs, you use about 15% of your lungs to do that, to exhale out, okay? So this is inhale. So this is inhalation. And then this is your exhale. It's kind of messy, but you get the point. The rest of this little space, you may be wondering, well, I inhaled, I exhaled, I got rid of all of the air, like I used a lot of my lungs. What is that leftover space? That leftover space is called your residual volume, or your RV, okay? Your residual volume is about 25% of your lungs. And now that seems kind of crazy. You're like, there's 25% of my lungs that still has air in it. Why would that be? Well, that air actually doesn't really leave, or there's not a whole lot of transition with that air. There's always some air left in your lungs. And if you think about it, why would there be air left in your lungs? Why would there be leftovers here? Leftover air is to avoid total collapse of your lung, right? If you think about it, if you got rid of all of your air, or your total lung capacity at once, your lungs would probably stick to each other, right? They would get so close to each other that there would be a collapse, right? So there's always some air left over in normal, healthy lungs to avoid that total collapse. And that is your residual volume, or your RV, okay? So your ability to exhale completely out and the stuff that you can't get rid of that you need that's still in there is about 40% of your lungs, and that's called your functional residual capacity. So the capacities you can see are just made up of these volumes, right? These different breathing in, breathing out. They're just a percentage of the capacity you have. So your functional residual capacity is made up of your functional ability to exhale and your residual volume, or the stuff that's still left over in your lungs. And that's 40% of your lung space, or your lung capacity, okay? So your total lung capacity is your whole lung, right? We talked about that. Your usable lung space, your stuff that you use to inhale on the daily, you're breathing in really deep, and then you're completely exhaling, blowing all the way out, is about 75% of your lung space. And that 75% is known as your vital capacity. And that makes sense because vital means life, right? So your normal, usable life breathing, everyday breathing, is your vital capacity. And that is 75% of your total lung space, right? We talked about how you're not using that leftover stuff at the very bottom. It's really not doing a whole lot of transition. It's still sitting in there. So you're using your normal daily, which is your tidal volume, your deep breathing in, which is your inspiratory reserve, the stuff, the power to deep breathe in, your expiratory reserve, which is your power to breathe and completely exhale and empty your lungs, which is 15%. And so together, all those percentages, you add them up and you get 75% of your total lung space, or your total lung capacity, which is called your vital capacity, okay? So that should help make this concept make a little more sense in your mind when you're reviewing these concepts. So if you have a question on the NPTE that asks you about like the percentage of your inspiratory reserve volume, you're going to think about like, okay, my inspiratory reserve volume is the power I can exhale out. So you might have a question about inspiratory capacity, right? Like, inspiratory capacity is made up of what, right? And then you would talk about how that's your ability to breathe in more, your space that you can breathe in more, which is your inspiratory reserve, plus your tidal volume, which is 100% or 10%, your normal daily breathing, right? Anyway, hopefully this makes the concept a little bit more easy or doable in your mind. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below, or you can contact me at my information on my channel, okay?